of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, our thoughts are with the loved ones of those who have sadly died after contracting the coronavirus and those that are still suffering from the disease, including the honourable member for Mid-Bedfordshire. I want once again to pay tribute to our medical staff working so hard to combat the spread of this disease and care for those affected. And I think we should all express our gratitude to the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor, who have shown exceptional leadership throughout, and we will continue to follow their advice. Mr Speaker, Sunday was International Women's Day, a day when we celebrate the achievements of women around the world, recognises the advances made in working towards a goal of gender equality, and most importantly, reflect on how far we have to go to achieve that. A quarter of social care workers, who are overwhelmingly women, are on 0 hours contracts. It's essential care workers self-isolate if they experience symptoms of coronavirus, but many may feel they have no choice but to continue working. Will the Prime Minister finally bring in emergency legislation to guarantee sick pay for 0 hours workers to help contain the spread of the virus?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I know the whole House will wish to join the right honourable gentleman in wishing my honourable friend, the Minister for Mental Health, a speedy recovery. And I know, Mr Speaker, that having talked to her, I know that she will make one. I know, Mr Speaker, you issued a letter to everybody across the parliamentary estate. And as you say in your letter, Mr Speaker, we will be guided by Public Health England in our response to this situation. And they are also providing guidance to honourable members and to their offices. And as the right honourable gentleman knows, in just a few minutes we will be hearing from my right honourable friend the Chancellor about what measures we are taking to protect everybody. As he knows, we've already brought forward statutory sick pay from day 4 to day 1. But for those who are on all types of contracts, we will ensure that they get the protection that they need, and nobody who does the right thing by staying at home is penalised.
Jeremy Corbyn.
I hope that legislation comes rapidly, and it does guarantee that people don't have to make a choice between spreading the virus because they have to go to work or staying at home and self-isolate, as obviously they should do if they've got the symptoms. Can the Prime Minister explain why, according to a report by the Institute of Health Equity, life expectancy has gone down for the poorest women in our society?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, overall life expectancy stands at its highest level, but I will not, highest level, which is, and a tribute to the consistent work of this government and others, but it is absolutely true that there are too many instances, too many parts of the country where we are seeing life expectancy not rise in the way that we would like. And it is true that there are parts of this country where 1 in 50, for instance, pregnant women are smokers, and parts of the country where only 1 in 4 pregnant women are smokers. And what we want to see is a uniting and a levelling up across this whole country. That's why we're putting record sums, £12 billion into public health, Mr Speaker. That's why this is the government, this is the party of the NHS that is now putting record investment into our NHS precisely for that purpose.
Jeremy Corbyn.
I don't think the Prime Minister answered my question. And it's no surprise, Mr Speaker, that life expectancy has gone down when 86% of the cuts made by successive Tory governments have landed disproportionately on the shoulders of women. We are one of the richest countries in the world, and it's mind-boggling that life expectancy should be falling in this country. Mr Speaker, for the poorest people in our society, life expectancy is falling. The government should have an answer to that. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister supports the absolutely horrendous rape clause in the child tax credit rules. Why does he think it's right that 200 mothers have to prove to the government their child was conceived as a result of being raped so they can keep their child tax credits?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to correct a point he's just made earlier. It is, I'm afraid, the case, as has been revealed just in the last few days, that mortality is at its lowest level in this country since 2001. And on his since 2001. And on his point about recipients of benefit, it is obviously that he draws attention to an injustice, and we will do everything that we can to rectify it.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I would hope that means the Prime Minister is going to introduce regulations to end the two-child policy and the benefit strategy, because that is exactly what happens when women who are victims of rape have to prove they've been raped in order to get benefits for their child. 50 years ago, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Minister Barbara Castle introduced the Equal Pay Act. But women are still paid 17% less than men. And under this government, the gender pay gap is estimated to take another 60 years to close. Why hasn't the Prime Minister followed Labour's lead and set a target for closing it by 2030?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not only are there now record women in employment in this country, but the gender pay gap is at a record low. And it was this Conservative government that made sure the companies had to report on the gender pay gap, Mr. Speaker.
Jeremy Corbyn.
17% gap. It is too big, too wide, and should be closed, and the government should do something about it. Mr. Speaker, every fortnight, 3 women are killed by their partner or ex-partner. Domestic violence is only likely to increase if large numbers of people are having to self-isolate. 10 years of austerity has denied councils the funding they need to support victims of domestic abuse. Will he commit to the extra £173 million needed every year to ensure that survivors get the support they so desperately need?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've just put record funding back into councils to support them in all their responsibilities. We are committed to, when he talks of domestic abuse, we're committed to bringing forward a victims' law to guarantee victims' rights, and this government has an outstanding record of tackling violence against women and girls, and that is why we are now taking forward in this Parliament our landmark domestic abuse bill.
Without funding, the domestic abuse bill will simply be a piece of paper. There has to be funding to ensure that those who are victims of domestic violence get the support they need in the centres they need that are underfunded by his government. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has made repeated offensive remarks against single mothers and their children. Yes, and he described them as ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive and illegitimate. Against Muslim women, saying they look like bank robbers. Against working women, suggesting the best way of dealing with advice from a female colleague is just to pat her on the bottom and send her on her way. Words have consequences. His offensive words are backed up with offensive and discriminatory policies, from the rape clause to dismantling local services which women, particularly BAME and disabled women, disproportionately rely on. Can the Prime Minister apologise for his offensive comments and ensure that these discriminatory policies are reversed by his government?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud of what this government has done to promote the rights of women. I'm proud that we have a record number of female MPs in our party today. I'm proud that this is the only party that has produced 2 female, not 1 but 2 female Prime Ministers. And wouldn't it be an extraordinary and amazing thing, Mr. Speaker?
Still waiting.
Wouldn't it be an amazing thing if that party were to produce a female leader of their own? Don't hold your breath, Mr. Speaker. And I will take no lessons in sexism from a party where good female MPs are bullied out of their party. Just because they've had the guts to stand up against the climate of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.